May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be free from harm. May all beings love life. May all beings awaken. Welcome to another Cuke Audio podcast. I'm DC Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, preserving the legacy of Shunryu Suzuki and those whose paths crossed his. Even if they crossed his in ways that are unexpected, and you'll see. I pray that you and yours are safe and comfortable, free from economic hardship, and able to get out and do whatever it is you want within the limitations of the universal precept of do as little harm as possible. Today we have a guest, Gaetano Maida, founder of the International Buddhist Film Festival, or something like that. He has a very interesting life, very interesting story, very impressive. And I've known him a long time, just off and on, running into him a lot, and always enjoyed, talking with him and hanging out with him. But I learned a lot of stuff there I didn't know. Well, I guess that's always true, but maybe more so with this one. So before we call him up, we're going to have our pause to meditate. But before we do that, let me see. I just wanted to give you a little report here. So I was worried. The recording engineer I work with had COVID, and we were all going to have COVID because he'd had a fever for 2 days, and we'd just been with him a few days prior. So I got tested, and he wouldn't get tested, right? And then I got tested. No, I was negative. But then he got tested because his doctor made him, and he'd have chills and fever, but he didn't have COVID, and he didn't have dengue, which we were actually more worried about. So that's good. But he's got a flu, I guess. I don't know what you call it. That's a big umbrella flu, but it doesn't cover COVID. So I want to say one other thing about COVID here in Bali. It was not long ago that I was reporting here, there was almost no COVID. I mean, we were down, we got 4.5 million people here, and we were down to some days 2 new positive cases, 3, 4, and that was going steady state like that, less than a death every 2 weeks. And then, Omicron came in, and then one day, it was, not the death thing was doubled, but the death and serious consequences follow a couple of weeks after a rise starts. But then one day it was instead of 3, say, there were 6, or instead of 2, there were 4, and then there were 8 new cases, and then 16. It kept going like that. And yesterday there were 1,500 new cases. Now, that's about as many new cases as we've ever had, I think. I can remember when it was pretty high, I don't know, last summer or late summer or early fall. Like there was 1,000 a day. I mean, I tapered off. But 1,500. I think we're probably hitting a peak here. I am definitely not hearing reports of the numbers of the serious illness and death, but let's wait and see, because like I said, it follows. I got my Moderna booster a week ago tomorrow, and oh boy, I had a nice week. I felt so lazy when I went and got tested. Clarissa, the doctor, she must be from Java. I don't know. She's like maybe 30. And I told her, well, I've just been really low energy. So, but I haven't felt bad. I've just basically sort of been lazy. I've kept working, it's easy to sit and work on a computer, but I've done a little yoga. I haven't wanted to walk. I've walked a little, but I haven't wanted to do anything like that. She said, well, that's Moderna, that's the way you're reacting to Moderna. But anyway, after I saw her, I went out and got in Yoman's Bemo, and he was driving home, and I got a WhatsApp from Today, the engineer. Yeah, he had neither COVID nor dengue. Oh, that was great. Because I was worried about some other musicians, and isn't that I was worried about him having dengue too. That's serious. I'm sure it has worse numbers than COVID. I'd rather have COVID than dengue, I'll tell you. And anyway, so I'm really happy to have it. And as somebody said, not somebody here. Yeah, when Today said he didn't want to get tested, I said, what do you think, you're an American? But somebody I was communicating with in America said, well, you can get COVID even if you've had a booster. I said, yeah, you can get in a car accident even if you have a seatbelt on. Good Lord, use your head. Pardon me. Okay. So now, as when you hear the bell, hit pause if you want, and meditate if you want, or whatever. And when you're ready to come back, hit unpause, and we'll strike the bell to end the meditation or whatever. And we'll give Gaetano Kazuo Maida a call. Gaetano Kazuo Maida. Yeah, I haven't said that. I just call him Tano. And what's interesting, and he says this in it, so this is a spoiler alert. He's half Japanese, half Sicilian. Wow, two heavy-duty tribes there, huh? And but what's funny is, like, one of my best friends in Japan is Maida, and he's Maida, but his Maida is Sicilian, M-A-I-D-A, and hers is Japanese, M-A-E-D-A. So anyway, all right, here we come with the bell.
Hello.
Hi, Tano. How you doing?
I'm fine. I'm fine. Good to hear your voice.
Where are you?
Oakland, Oakland. 21 years and counting. Hard to believe.
Where?
Um, Kind of near the College of Art, California College of Arts. Kind of on the edge. It's not really in a neighborhood. It's sort of right at the intersection of Temescal, Rockridge, and Piedmont.
Oh, I was just hearing about that school yesterday. Yeah, it goes back, huh? I remember it from when I first came to California.
Yeah, yeah, it's still there. Yeah. Well, the school is quite old, and if he was in the Bay Area, that would be very, very possible. Um, and it's interesting. It's right around the corner from our house. The school bought the old Greyhound bus uh, um, terminal. Not It's where they used to park all the buses in San Francisco, and it's not where you went to get a bus. Anyway, they bought it, and they have built it into quite an interesting, I would say, college facility, and was going so well. And they had buses going back and forth between Oakland and San Francisco. Even before the pandemic, they decided, no, this is crazy. We should just put all of our eggs in the San Francisco basket. So they put up the Oakland campus for sale, and they closed down the facility. It's pretty much mothballed right now. And a developer has got his tit in the ringer because he proposed a 21-story apartment building on the site, and there's nothing taller than 4 stories anywhere within a half a mile. So there's an uproar. But in any case, there are 2 buildings on the campus that are landmarked. So they're really, and they date from the 19th century. It's a beautiful little campus, but it's no longer going to be functioning as a college. So things change. Things change, yes. But that's why College Avenue is called College Avenue, because the north terminus of College Avenue is UC Berkeley. The south terminus of College Avenue is the California College of Arts and Crafts.
Yeah, when I first came out in '66, I ran into people who were going there or thinking of going there or whatever. I'd hear about it. But it was the San Francisco Art Institute where I actually went and enjoyed going, met cool people. A lot of people from Zen Center had come through it. And I'd go there and eat and smoke pot.
Well, and they're both in various phases of trouble. So the one in San Francisco Art Institute almost closed down last year. They basically made a strategic error, and they bought some property at the exact wrong time, and they got in some financial trouble. But things seem to have stabilized. We shall see. The pandemic is hiding a lot of fractures, because it's not clear what is pandemic and what is endemic. Anyhow, it's hard to justify $40,000 a year art education in this crazy consumerist society that we have inherited.
Oh, gee, I skipped that part. Yeah.
Me too. Me too.
So, Dono, what are you up to these days?
Well, the short answer is all my eggs are kind of in the one basket Buddhist Film Foundation, but that is become, as as is very typical of me, a much broader remit than one might imagine. So it includes the International Buddhist Film Festival, which, by the way, we're doing one in Barcelona, Spain in October, which we snuck in before the new, what do they call them, Omicron mandates came in. So we were able to we had an in-theater event, 4 days. It was a little, attenuated because of the pandemic, but still we had live audiences and 9 premieres. It was great. It was wonderful to present films to a real enthusiastic audience. So anyway, so Buddhist Film Foundation does the International Buddhist Film Festival. We are just about to launch BuddhistFilmChannel.com, which will be our own streaming platform for, think of it as a digital archive for rentals. And that's happening. And we also are fiscal sponsors. We have a number of films in various stages of development and production that we help raise money for, including one that is inspired and informed by Rick Field's book, How the Swans Came to the Lake, which I'm producing with an award-winning producer in LA named Lynn Goldfarb. And the title of that is The American Story of Buddhism. And that one is making its way through the very thick forest that protects the money tree in Washington, D.C. But anyway, we're working on that. And you know that the 40th anniversary edition is officially published on February 8th of How the Swans Came to the Lake. Beautiful, beautiful effort by his nephew, Ben Bogan. He looked at the task, and he decided not to rewrite the book. He just wrote an extensive and useful introduction, and got Shambhala to pay for a new index, which it was sorely needing. It was very pathetic index in the first editions, and there's a new cover, and they're going to launch it on February 8th. That's news. You can put that in your next on your website. That'd be late 70s. Yeah, that's just when he was doing it. First edition was 1981.
Yeah, and Rick did that in a lot of it anyway in Bolinas, where I was living half the time, and I got to see him a lot, and talk to him about the book and all that. And he had some sort of grant. He was staying in a place that had like cottages for artists and writers. I can't remember, but anyway, it was great having him around. I loved him.
Well, it's so charming. It's done in a conversational, journalistic, non-academic tone, and so you feel like you're being told a story by somebody who really knows the story, and we love Rick, and if you go to our website, you'll see that we put up a page for the book and for him, etc., to promote it.
Give us the name and the link, okay?
Buddhist Film Foundation.org, and it's right on the home page, and it's kind of for us. I mean, Rick, of course, we were very close with Rick when we both moved out from. It's hard to believe we both left New York in 1990, and we ended up in Berkeley, and he ended up, as you may recall, as editor of Yoga Journal.
Yeah, I can remember visiting him in the office over there, wherever that was.
Yeah, on University Avenue, and of course, somewhere in there, 95, I think he got diagnosed with his lung cancer, and so we kind of sort of circled the wagons, and he became a regular overnight visitor in our house because he had to have treatments in Berkeley, and he was at that point living in Fairfax with Marcia. They got married in our backyard. It was very sweet. Yeah, it was a fabulous event.
And I'm sure Peter Warshaw was there. They were really close.
He was. Peter, I haven't. Oh, poor Peter. Yeah, we lost a lot of friends. A lot of friends have left us. Yeah.
They were rather similar in appearance.
They were, and they were birds of a feather too. Yes, they look like brothers. Yeah.
And they both were involved with Bolinas, especially Peter Warshaw. He actually he's quite responsible for Bolinas and having been preserved as well as it is without development. Amazing.
He removed the sign.
He was on the water board in Bolinas, and he might have been the designer. He was involved in the design and the building of the sewage system there, and it couldn't handle any more water hookups, so they made a rule that you can't have any more water hookups. And there, as far as I know, there still haven't been, or hardly any. Last time I was there, like a little over 8 years ago, it looked pretty much the same.
That's what's known as skillful means.
Orville Shell wrote a book about it called The Town That Fought to Save Itself, and Orville lived there.
Yeah, he can write too.
So when did you get into this Buddhist film business, huh?
We started what is now known as Buddhist Foundation Film Foundation in the year 2000, and Rick Fields was going to be on our original founding board of directors had he lived. We started meeting in well, I'll back it up. Originally, the International Buddhist Film Festival was supposed to be a tricycle project. When I kind of uh, exited tricycle, and we all started the magazine in New York City, but then Rick and I moved to Berkeley. I maintained the West Coast office for tricycle, and it was part of our original business plan to move from magazines into conferences and an imprint for publishing, and to do a film festival. And they did all the others. You know, we got an imprint at Riverhead, and we got uh, the beginnings of a conference program going at the World Trade Center. It was still standing, and Rick and I were out here in Berkeley, and I said, "Yeah, it's time to do the film festival. We've just seen, Kundun, and we've seen 7 years in Tibet, and it's beginning to be a thing." And they said, we can't hardly keep our noses above water. If you want to do that, you're going to have to do it by yourself. And at that point in my life, I wasn't really keen on starting another nonprofit without having a billionaire endowment. But it just seemed like it was one of those unmet needs that really was sort of a gap. There were a lot of books being published, yours not least among them. And there were, at that point already, the two major magazines, what's now known as Lion's Roar and, of course, Tricycle. But the film arena wasn't really being protected. A lot of films were being made, but they weren't getting through the gatekeepers into the major festivals or into theaters. And we just, we could see it. I'm a filmmaker myself, so I knew from firsthand, what was really happening in the marketplace. I had been a jury chair at the San Francisco International Film Festival for 5 years, and saw a lot of films, hundreds of films, and never could get a Buddhist film through the system there. So it just kind of became incumbent on any of us who cared to do something about it. So we started it in the year 2000. Our first planned festival was set for October 2001 in Manhattan. Talk about bad planning. Anyway, we had to cancel. Bad timing. Well, we had to accede to forces greater than ourselves, and we were able to get our actual first festival up, and really very, very warmly received at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art in 2003, and that went swimmingly, and quite to our amazement. Frankly, it was a wonderful event. We got to premiere a number of films, one of which is a classic by Kensei Norbu called Travelers and Magicians. And yeah, it's a wonderful film. And so from that 2003 event, we ended up in 2004 with something that we had never anticipated. We did not expect to get invited by other institutions, but in 2004 we were invited by the Smithsonian to bring a version of the festival there. 2005 we did our own festival in San Francisco. 2006 we were invited to Amsterdam, the Netherlands. 2007 we were in Singapore. 2008, we were in Mexico City for the biggest audience we'd ever seen. We had 50,000 people, 50,000 people attend the opening day events. 50,000 people. We had no idea that that was possible. And 2009, we were in London, England, and we showed 46 films on 3 screens at the Barbican Center for a 10-day festival. It was amazing, absolutely amazing. And then we kept going. 2012, we were in Hong Kong, we were in Bangkok, we were in Vancouver. Um, that wasn't our plan. We were blindsided by the interest and the opportunities that came to us from overseas. And yeah, so that's had a life of its own. And as you probably know, the pandemic has upended everything. And of course, the streaming habit that most modern folks seem to have acquired has is a big challenge to the movie theaters, especially the art house movie theater model. So we have to move very rapidly into the streaming world with Buddhist Film Channel, and that's the next big effort here.
And when did Michael Wenger do the? He did an early Buddhist film festival, with a limited number of movies, not on the scale you're on. But anyway, that was neat.
Well, it was he did it in 1999, and I worked with him on it. It, it was called Reel to Reel, Reel to Reel, spelled REAL, Reel to Reel, making a joke. Anyway, that was a good year. Interestingly enough, uh, in 2019, I did a program at the Rafael called The Class of '99. And we showed the Smith Rafael Film Center in San Rafael, also known locally as the Rafael. A beautiful nonprofit cinema with 3 screens. Original money came in from the likes of George Lucas. It has the best screening facilities in the Bay Area. It's a wonderful institution. It's owned by the It opened in 1999. It's owned by an entity, California Film Institute, a nonprofit, is the owner of that, and the owner of the Mill Valley Film Festival.
Oh yeah, I've lived in San Rafael a couple of times, and I remember that place. Yeah, neat.
It's a wonderful wonder. I mean, it's amazing that it's in Marin because it doesn't have the population density of, say, even Berkeley, let alone San Francisco, and neither Berkeley nor San Francisco has a comparable institution, which is why I'm delighted that they invite us to present there whenever we want, and pretty much we have an open invitation to make a proposal for something we would like to have in a movie theater, and usually they go along with it.
So, can you give us an example? What films we talking about here?
Well, let's talk about the most recent big news on the Buddhist cinema circuit, and then we can go deep. We just had the premiere of a film in December at our film festival. It was opening night film, and the title of the film is Lunana, a Yak in the Classroom. And this is a debut feature film from a director from Bhutan. And the film is stunning. It's filmed in the most remote village in Bhutan, population 56, no electricity, no running water, no television, no internet. It's a really rural location. And the filmmaker had to actually bring solar panels, generators, and set up a tent city for his crew of 35 because there's no hotels, there's no place to stay, and they had to bring their own food, and they sort of camped out for 3 months. So this film not only is it well made, but it's an audience pleasing title. It is the Bhutan's submission for the Best International Feature Academy Award. And at the Academy, there were 100 films that were eligible for that award. And they announced their shortlist last month at the end of December. And it was one of 15 on the short list, which is a historic event. And on February 8th, the Academy announces the 5 finalists, the nominees for the Best International feature. And it could squeak by. We will see. But in any case, as a result, they have a very, very important distributor has come on board, Samuel Goldwyn, and the film has on 21st of January. The film opened in New York, LA, and San Francisco, and the week after it started to widen. It's now in several other cities, and I suspect this film will really garner a new audience for this type of cinema. It's a wonderful film, small story. Now you should know the filmmaker, whose name is Pawo Choining Dorji. Pawo is a skilled still photographer who was recruited by Kensei Norbu. Our audience will probably know that Kensei Norbu is also, and perhaps better known as Zangtsar Jamyang Kensei Rinpoche. But anyway, Kensei Norbu recruited Pawo as his assistant director on a film called Vara, which is one of Norbu's earlier films. And then Pawo became the producer of Hema Hema, Sing Me a Song While I Sleep, which was a feature film that Kensei Norbu did on location in Bhutan. And subsequently, he wrote himself a script and got it produced, and it is now in movie theaters in the United States and in 14 other countries. It's a real breakthrough film, real breakthrough, and not coincidentally, but maybe very justifiably, this is the second film that Bhutan nominated in its entire history for Academy consideration. The first film was Kensei Norbu's The Cup, which was made in 1999. So, yeah, and so there's a lineage here, and it's wonderful story, and the filmmaker is more than just charming. He's brilliant. He's very knowledgeable. He's a skilled storyteller, and he's a long-term student of Kensei Norbu.
Do you know about the Bali International Film Festival? The woman who runs it just lives around the corner. We see her now and then.
Well, I know it by name. I haven't had the pleasure, as I have to say, I'm envious of you, of getting to Bali. So we'll have to say that it's on the bucket list, but it hasn't happened yet.
Her name is Deborah Gavanetti. We're acquaintances. We've gone to the same get-togethers. And anyway, it's quite a prestigious film festival, and a lot of people come. We've never been.
If she's one of your listeners, perhaps she will.
No, I'm confident she's not one of our listeners.
Well, in any case, yeah. I mean, the truth is, our best partners are other film festivals and their presenting institutions. Those have proven to be, very reliable and efficient partners. They have all the elements that we need.
I'll send her a note about this podcast and tell her a little bit about you.
Thank you. Beautiful.
I mean, how many Buddhist films are there, or how many films that you include in the Buddhist Film Festival are there?
Oh, well, we've shown since 2003, we have shown close to 400 different films, and from 22 countries. And if there's anything that we have committed ourselves to, besides the issue of what is Buddhist cinema, is diversity. We make an extraordinary effort to reach out beyond the obvious participants. The countries with money, Germany, England, France, Switzerland, the United States, they tend to get more films made. I mean, it's just the way it is. But we have made an effort to include Southeast Asian countries. For instance, Burma. You may know that we've just launched the Burma Spring Benefit Film Festival online to raise money to raise money for humanitarian aid. And we ran it once in June, and we raised about $50,000 and got it distributed to grassroots groups on the ground, and to honor and bring attention to the anniversary, the first year anniversary of the disastrous military coup. We decided to run it again, and we added another, 8 to 10 new programs, and we're running it February 1st to February 13th. Again, with the idea to expose audiences to the extraordinary diversity of communities and ethnic cultures in Burma, Myanmar, and also to bring attention to this disastrous military coup. And we just took a look. I see the analytics, at any point, and we just took a look. There are already been several thousand folks have watched films in the last 2 days. So we're excited about that. But so showing films from Burma and from places like Vietnam and from Bhutan and from Hong Kong, Japan, Korea. Korea is a very prodigious film production country, and they have a deep Buddhist culture, of course. It's really, it's been for us an experience of really demonstrating that this Buddhist sort of river current flows all over the world. It's not a just a San Francisco, New York thing.
So India has a giant film industry and different film industries for different languages, like Bengali in Calcutta, the sort of art center. And I was in Chennai, near there. I was in Tamil Nadu, and by the Ramana ashram, and I watched with my landlady and her mother and sister. I'd watch Tamil films, and so there's this giant film industry there. So, what you got going? Anything Buddhist come out of there?
Well, the oldest film in our collection of presentations was made in 1925 in India with German money. It was a German-Indian co-production, and it is a black and white silent masterpiece based on the famous book The Light of Asia, and in in Hindi it's called Prem Sannyas. And this film, we've shown this film with commissioned live music performances, each one different, in San Francisco, in London, in Bangkok, and Mexico City. Each one had a different commissioned live music performance to accompany the silent film. So the oldest film was made in India. And it's a beautiful film. I mean, those of us who have made any attempt to understand the Buddhist story will say, will find fault with a vaguely Christianized context for the original book, The Light of Asia. But it doesn't take away from the heartfelt production and the experience of watching this film. You're looking at people and events filmed on location with the help of the what do they call them? In Jaipur, this was the I forget the name of the, what do they call those local kings in India? Maharaj of Jaipur essentially said, "You want to make a film here? I offer you my people, my villages, my castles, my elephants, my camels, and my horses." So all of the background activity is filmed on location with the permission and protection of the Maharaja. So you can imagine how vivid this footage is, even though they're acting out a little story in front of the camera at close-ups. What's going on behind them is real life. 1925. It's a wonderful film.
Jaipur, town I really enjoyed, is in Rajasthan. It's Muslim.
Of course, yes, but they're completely, the Maharajas were a whole nother breed of Indian. They weren't necessarily sectarian. Anyway, we have good friends in India who live in Dharamshala, and they're filmmakers. We've shown all of their films. Their names are Ritu Saran and Tendon Sonam. And they've made a number of wonderful films, mostly documentaries, but they've made a couple of feature films. But equally important, they started and are continuing to run the Dharamshala International Film Festival, or known as DIFF, DIFF. And this year, of course, because of COVID, it's online. And we programmed the current International Buddhist Film Festival program, the current offering from DIFF, which is online starting on February 4th and running for 10 days to February 14th. So we're very involved with India. India is dominated, the film industry is dominated by what's known as Bollywood. And obviously, and exactly, or Mumbai, right. And all those films are really, of a type of entertainment, singing and dancing and no kissing and et cetera, et cetera. And there's a huge market for it. They make more films than Hollywood does in Bollywood.
Yeah, when I think of Bollywood, I think of masala films. Masala, like masala tea, spices, because they mix all sorts of elements in them, dancing and gangsters and gunfights and lovers.
Right. Well, and it's very, very real. But they're not paying any attention to the Buddhists. The Buddhists in India, of course, tend to be the formerly known as Dalit population, the Ambedkar.
Gee, I stayed with Dalits in Pune, stayed in a Dalit house. new Buddhists, and they taught me the word Dalit to use. I didn't even know it before then.
Well, actually, even that has been among the Dalits. They prefer not to use that because, of course, it became interchangeable with the untouchables. Now they're trying to step away.
Yeah, the guy who was in the sort of leader of the group, he took Clay and me out to dinner and brought along a copy of Crooked Cucumber for me to sign. That surprised me.
I love it. I love it. We are the fiscal sponsors for a filmmaker who's trying to make a feature-length documentary about Ambedkar, who, of course, is the founder of the new Buddhist movement. In 1956, he converted to Buddhism. He said, "You know, I was born a Hindu, but I'm not going to die a Hindu," and he chose Buddhism. And 500,000 people stood up when he announced his conversion, and they said, you know, we're with you. And so, you know, this instantaneous 500,000 converts to Buddhism. But unfortunately, he died 3 months later and wasn't able to help this whole new community uh, make the transition from being untouchables. And it took a long time for some Buddhist groups to go to India and begin the process of teaching these people what it meant to take refuge in the Buddha, the Sangha.
And Ambedkar was he he wrote the Constitution, right? The new Constitution when India got independence.
He wrote it, yes. Although he had to accede to Gandhi's very strong objection to the elimination of caste, which was written into the original constitution.
Wow, I didn't know that. But I know that the Dalits consider Gandhi their enemy. I mean, that's what there was a Dalit monk at Sogenji in Japan, where you know, where I lived next door, and that's what he taught me, what he told me, and I was surprised. I had no idea.
Yes, he definitely vetoed the possibility of enshrining in the Constitution the end to caste. He said he would go on a hunger strike if that clause remained in the Constitution.
Yeah, and Gandhi said all I'd read before was that some of them didn't like it because he referred to them as God's favorite children or something. But Bodhi was really down on him.
Understandable. He's very patronizing. It's a real kind of what we call original sin of India, of the modern India.
Yeah, I'm not real wild about the do your duty, go off and kill your cousins line in was that the Mahabharata or whatever, and wow, yeah, and the way some of those old myths lay out a roadmap for how what women's role is and how to deal with problems with them, like if they get kidnapped by the evil king over in Sri Lanka, and like Krishna would never have anything to do with her again, and she had not submitted to him. It was just, oh, wow.
That's not the modern India. We can't blame them for that, but the British, we can blame the British for the rest of it.
I was traveling across northern India with this film crew, and we ended up in Calcutta, and we had our driver went back and left us there, so we took a taxi, and our driver, I think it was a Sikh because he had a turban, he went on and on about how much better it was under the British and how much better they were at managing things.
Yeah. Well, yeah, management, but they learned all of that from the British. The British were very, very good at some things, and we are considering all the attention we've brought to Burma. We are seeing the fingerprints of British rule there as well, and it's quite undermining of local. Democratic energies. Let's just put it that way. We can look all over the world at any of the hotspots, and we can see the fingerprints of the British Empire.
You mentioned The Light of Asia, some film on that, and it's based on the book, right, that was published, about Buddha in 1879.
Yep, sold 1 million copies. Well, yeah, I mean, what's amazing was that uh, he was British, the author, Sir Edwin Arnold, and his family was connected to all the transcendentalists in Boston. The Alcotts were connected to the Arnolds, and there are all kinds of sort of interwoven relationships that made that book really work in the United States. Went through 80 editions. I mean, this is a remarkable publishing story for the 19th century USA.
I've read into it a little. Yeah, it's like a poem, right?
Yeah, yeah, it was an epic poem. But tonight, I mean, it was a great introduction at a time when nobody knew anything. I mean, there was so little information about Buddhism. I mean, the European scholars who were wandering around in their colonial holdings weren't even sure that the Buddhism that they were seeing in Sri Lanka was the same, came from the same source that was appearing in Japan or in Thailand or China. Because the words were so different and the styles were so different. So, but it took them a while, and they finally figured out this is the same guy. He just has all these different names, and that was round about that time, late 19th century, when things started to become clear in terms of the scholarship. This is another, by the way, another of the gifts of how the swans came to the lake, because Rick, unlike many of the other efforts to tell the story of Buddhism in America, he went all the way back. He went back to the Shakyamuni Buddha and told the story, from as far back as he could, lead the reader through. And he included all of the European scholars, and how Buddhism was confusing, and which translations became sort of fundamental to the way the West understood, or at least perceived Buddhism. And do you know the work of David Brazier? He's a British Buddhist and a writer and a psychologist. And he's been going down to the original Sanskrit translations and digging through the earliest sutras, and coming up with a nuanced alternative to the basic words that everyone takes for granted. Dukkha. We'll start with dukkha, and he said, no, it's not suffering. Definitely not suffering. He's taken on words like samsara and nirvana and noble. He's a brave lad. Anyway, and a lot of the words that we commonly hear in Buddhist conversations and writings in the West all emanate from early translations before there was the kind of depth that is available today. So I think we'll see some revisions in the literature.
Yeah, well, suffering is only one aspect of dukkha. It's like incompleteness. But Suzuki would point out that suffering means joy, too. It's like samsara is the realm of suffering and joy. There's nothing you can depend on. You can't cling to any state of mind. The impermanence is part of it. I call it, I can't get no satisfaction.
That kind of works.
What's that writer's name again?
Brazier, Brazier, David. And the book to read is, well, he's got several, but one of the books that would be, I think, useful is called The Feeling Buddha. He's got another one, which it came later, which may be even more on point, but it's a lot more, it's a little denser. It's called The New Buddhism. But the Feeling Buddha gets to the heart of the what we commonly refer to as the Four Noble Truths.
So, Dano, how did you get into all this, huh?
Yeah, well, one can argue from the broader view that it's karma, but you see, I'm half Japanese. It's just a fact. The truth is, my mother died when I was very young. She was Japanese, and so I can't really 8 years old. So so I can't really blame her or credit her for the influence, except that she left a library, and this is something that is underappreciated in this current age, but having a library in the house and having free run of same at an early age can be very formative. And I got to see a lot. She had a lot of art books. She was herself a teacher. She was a Columbia grad, and she taught different things. She was primarily teaching math, but she also ran a nursery school for the Federation of Jewish Philanthropies. And so she had a broad sense of what, teaching, learning, education was about, and having books around for me to read was kind of a side project for her, given that, I was going to school, but I wasn't going to her schools. So I was getting this supplementary education from her. But after she died, we really had zero connection with the Japanese side. You can imagine a Sicilian Japanese family. Both of the protagonists had violated tribal rules, so there wasn't much. So there wasn't much communication between the two. But my father gave me a book when I was like 12 or 13. And he thought I would enjoy it and get something out of it. And this book was Zorba the Greek by Nikos Kazantzakis. Now, most people remember the title and they think of the film, because the film was such a success and Anthony Quinn was so, dominant in it as the dancing Greek spirit of life. And so that's what, when you say Zorba the Greek, that's what people think of. But if you read the book and try and eliminate the film from your memory, you realize that it was a much more complex story. And of course, there's no way to to make a film of a novel and include everything in the novel. And all of us understand that. And the reality is we love the film for what it is, but it leaves out an essential element of the novel. The essential element is there are two protagonists in the novel. There is the author, the narrator's voice, known in the book as the boss, and then there's Zorba's voice. And the two of them have made their way to create a mine that has been inherited by the boss, but he doesn't have any interest in doing it himself. He feels it's more like an adventure, something that he should do, and having someone like Zorba run it made his life easier. So what is he doing while Zorba is building this mine and hiring all the workers and engaging with the local Greek Orthodox monastery that controls the land, et cetera, et cetera? Well, he's sitting on the beach writing a book. What is the book he is writing? It's a book on Buddha. Nobody remembers that. Nobody remembers that. But that's what he is working on the beach. And, you know, because the Zorba character becomes so dominant in our memory of the book, and it is the title of the book after all, so, you know, let's say all is forgiven. But the author, Kazantzakis, was sincerely exploring the world of that he had access to. We're talking 1930s when he's writing about this event. He only had access to books about Buddhism. He had never met a Buddhist teacher. He actually had never met a Buddhist practitioner, but he was a philosophy student, and he really dug deeply into Buddhism. He dug so deeply into Buddhism that was available to him. Primarily, we're talking about Theravadan texts that he was getting in translation. He spoke Greek and French, and so he was reading Buddhist texts in French, which, as you know, the French were among the first to do serious translations from Sanskrit. Anyway, he's reading in French, and he's saying to himself, "It cannot be this emptiness. Cannot be." The a void. It's not possible. He basically imagined a Buddhism that is very, very close to Mahayana, which he had no access to. He had no knowledge of. He had no inkling of the difference. But he sort of intellectually made the leap from what we refer to as Theravadan Orthodox text to an imagined, compassionate, engaged idea of a bodhisattva. He didn't use that word, but he came to that later in life. He wrote about it in his memoir, which is called Report to Greco. But that said, reading Zorba when I'm 13 years old sort of lit a little bit of a fire under me, because nobody was speaking in that kind of language and so well. I have to say, I read Zorba the Greek every 5 years as sort of a mind experiment. Where am I different from where I was 5 years ago? And believe me, it's not the same river. You can't stand in the same river twice. So it's a delight to read every single time, and I see how critical that, we'll say, inspiration was to a young mind, and it became a reference point for me that this guy who wrote this book, who had so many talents, he was a brilliant writer and a real philosopher. He was looking elsewhere for something that was not available to him in the West. As deeply, he famously was first a Greek Orthodox. He was a monk, He was born and raised Greek Orthodox. He then became a Marxist-Leninist and a real fire-breathing one. He became a minister in the Greek government for a short period of time, and then he found Buddhism. And he identified as a Buddhist for many years of his life. And as he was sort of looking backwards as he got older, he realized that no matter what, the only real identity that he felt was constant within him was that of an artist. And it was beyond, identifying as a Westerner or a Christian or a Buddhist or a Marxist-Leninist revolutionary. He was an artist, and he had to embrace that. But anyway, that book took me by surprise. It remained a real touchstone, and it started the quest. I quit high school before graduation, and I headed straight to San Francisco, where I had early admission at Cal, and I still haven't made it over to the admission office.
Well, that's an impressive college career. Mine, I didn't get through the freshman year at two schools, one in Texas and the University of the Americas in Mexico City. Both of them I dropped out of, and both of them told me I couldn't come back.
So yeah, it became I have to say that was the beginning. And I got here in '67, so I got after the Summer of Love. I didn't come for the summer, but I got here in December of '67, and spent the next 4 years doing what you do instead of going to college.
Yeah, in Mexico at school, I learned how to smoke pot and take peyote and romalar and screw around, play guitar in whorehouses.
Oh,
So it seems like reading led you out there initially.
well, it kind of lit a fire, and obviously in those days, almost everything was a function of literature. Again, I had this great library. I had Hermann Hesse, I had Kafka, I had, you name it. My father was a reader, and he was an inveterate used bookstore prowler, and came with bags every week. And, I just devoured the whole thing. I have a copy here of the 1958 Evergreen Review, with the original translations by Gary Snyder of the Cold Mountain poems. That's my father's copy, and I got Gary to sign it. But I'll give you an example. So this is my father. This is what he would go out and get. This is the volume 2, number 6, and it has this is just a random issue of Evergreen Review. It has Franz Klein, it has Lorca, it has Michael McClure, it has Frank O'Hara, it has Robert Creeley and D.T. Suzuki, all in one issue of the magazine. And so this is the food that was coming into my little brain, along with all the other stuff. And when I left New York, and I left not with an idea of going somewhere. I left with the idea of leaving somewhere. It was kind of an intolerable sort of situation. After my mother died, we were sort of immediately impoverished. She earned twice as much as my father. He was a union organizer in a blue collar situation, and she was a Columbia grad teacher. And when she died, we were down to like 1/3 of the family income. So we went from a house in a private house that we owned in the Bronx into a one-bedroom apartment, 4 flights up, with a triple-decker bed. You know, my father on the bottom, me in the middle, and my brother on top. So that can't last. That can't last for too long. So I bailed and ended up in San Francisco by virtue of karma. My father had 2 children by another woman prior to myself and my brother, and we had become friends, and so I ended up staying with them in San Francisco in Bernal Heights. Yeah, and so a new life began, and that was you. So, well, it was December 67, so we're talking, really 68, 69, 70, 71. And that's when I was here, and everybody was coming through town. I mean, of course, Shunryu Suzuki Roshi was going strong, but this was San Francisco was the crossroads of the then spiritual world. I mean, Steve Gaskin was doing his classes. Satchitananda was here setting up Integral Yoga Institute. You had well, we didn't know, but we know now. I mean, there Tartang Tulku was in the area, not in San Francisco, but Alan Watts was still out in Sausalito. It was a different time, a different place, and a little bit like a kid in a candy shop. I went everywhere. I had nothing, I had no obligation. And in those days, young people, sad to say, I have to tell you, you didn't need any money to live in the Bay Area. No money. I mean, we had a 4-bedroom house with a view of the bay, 4-bedroom house with a view of the bay for $150 a month. I mean, totally insane. They offered to sell it to us for $18,000, and we thought they were crazy, too much money. Anyway, it was so different then, because if you don't have to give all your time and attention to making money, you can explore your mind, you can explore your body, you can explore the world without too many constraints.
You're absolutely right. It was very different back then. Oh, God. It was so much easier for us.
Very different.
Poor people could own houses. God, there was more opportunity for more people. Money was distributed much more evenly. And I remember we used to say, leave home with a nickel and come back with a dime.
Well, yeah, we all we all lived that life and survived. And one of the reasons why I left, and I probably wouldn't have left, for again, I was leaving as opposed to going somewhere. I didn't know where I was going to go, but my circle of friends sort of graduated from marijuana and hashish and psilocybin mushrooms. They graduated to hard drugs, and that scared the shit out of me. And I had no affinity for that approach to life.
I was lucky. I was out there 6 months, and then I stumbled on the San Francisco Zen Center in Suzuki, and I pretty much took care of that problem.
Yeah, you were very lucky, and I got afraid. I mean, I had thought, you know, I was the young kid on the block, and my friends were mostly older. And this group of friends, they went down that dangerous path, and not all of them are alive as a result. And I sensed that I was too young to be able to stand on my own 2 feet in that circle, and I figured maybe I better step away for a while and see what else there is. And I'd been practicing hatha yoga at the Integral Yoga Institute, and I really got into it. I was very uh, sort of committed to a practice which included meditation, but not the type of meditation that the Buddhist traditions tend to teach. But it was how shall we say the gateway to the other teachings that became available afterwards. But escape I did, and you'll laugh. I tried for a while to get a band together. Spent a whole summer rehearsing a band on Gravenstein Highway up in Sebastopol, and we could not get it together. It basically was a function of we had a lot of we all had chops, and we loved to play, but we didn't have enough original material. And I ended up booking the band, and we would pretty much just jam on Wade in the Water or Cuckoo, for half an hour. It just 1, 2, 3, 4, go, and then we just jam for a bit, and that's not very entertaining. It was a lot of fun for us, but it wasn't very entertaining. We were not audience-oriented musicians, so it didn't quite come together. But in those days, you could have an enormous amount of fun playing music with your friends. And you're still doing it. You're still playing music with your friends. God bless you.
Yeah, well, we have become friends, but I'm playing with professional musicians who are out of work because of COVID. No tourists here. Almost entirely out of work. Not entirely.
I know. I think it's fabulous. It's very tight. The production is perfect, and it's the kind of thing that people pay big money to go to rock camp. Grown-ups go to rock and roll camp to play with professionals and to record their efforts. You got it going on. You got it going on all by yourself. I think it's great.
Well, I've had some help from COVID and living in Bali, which just has a totally different economy from there. I mean, I pay them good money, just like they were working. And good money here, good wage for a day is $14 for the day. And that's what I pay them for 3 hours of practice, or going and recording in the studio, plus lunch. Everybody gets lunch. But lunches here, the type of lunch they want, costs about $1.50.
Oh my God. Oh Lord.
Studio time. I've worked in studios in the States, and I called up a real top studio and talked to a friend of mine there, the owner, and we figured out it costs about 1/11 here of what it costs there, and that's for top studio time. But it adds up, that's too expensive for me, so we only do drums there, and then go to the engineer's home for his little studio to do everything else. Oh, and I do want to add, I don't use any Cuke Archives money for this or any money that's donated to Cuke Archives. I had a little windfall due to good karma, and mainly I set it aside to get a little every month, which is still we have to depend on donations, but also spend a little doing this. And it's still too expensive, but I can't stop. It's just such a great opportunity.
Oh, I'm so happy for you. I mean, and you've really, you're an inspiration to all of us. Your retirement strategy is way beyond anybody else's imagination. I congratulate you on your intelligence.
I think if you checked with my wife, she would say I am in no way retired. But anyway, thank you very much for your compliment. But that's enough of that crap. Hey, Tano, what happened next, huh? Pick it up wherever you were.
Well, I started with a girlfriend. I started a health food co-op in Bernal Heights. Um, yeah, and we named it Sonoma Natural Foods because we were getting all of our fruits and vegetables from Sonoma County, and one of our members was instrumental in that. So we thought it would be exotic in San Francisco to have a health food store called Sonoma Natural Foods.
Did you know Fred Rohe over at New Age Natural Foods, the Oakland food mill?
We knew everybody because there was a San Francisco Health Food Owners Association, and we all complained about false labeling and how to prove something was organic, et cetera, et cetera. It was this is 1969. We were all having the same conversations they're having today, and and we're going to Texas for Deaf Smith County grains, because they had the best quality. And oh man, it was a whole. And we're driving to LA to get Erewhon products from their Beverly Boulevard warehouse. And anyway, we did a lot of things that nobody has to go through anymore. But we made our own granola, and we had our own yogurt we made from milk direct from dairies. And yeah, we had a lot of fun. But so I did that, and we realized how much work it was. And me being the young one, I ended up doing most of that work. And we were able to sell the lease at one point for a modest amount of money, which represented, though, probably 5 years of my labor. Was immediately available, and I learned something about business as a result. I got invited as a result of that little project, which sounds so minuscule today, but as a result of that project, I got invited to go to Los Angeles to help a group start a restaurant, and we'll call it a more than a restaurant, a health food store with a restaurant, a bookstore, and a cooking school, all in one big area. And it was funded by an eccentric guy who was in the animation business, and he was making a lot of money doing children's television. It was called the Sid and Marty Cross. Was the name of Sid and Marty were brothers, and that was the name of their entity. And they were doing a whole bunch of second tier television animation, and they wanted to get into the health food business. So anyway, we spent several months putting together a big project on the old Liberty Records campus. The Liberty Records was going out of business. They had this big facility on Sunset Boulevard, and the Sid and Marty Croft signed a lease and handed us the blueprints and said, "Have at it." So I spent a few months doing that, and then we woke up one day to discover that they had just signed a deal to move to Atlanta and open the Sid and Marty Croft amusement park. So, so that project never came to fruition, but it was a great lesson because I was only dealing with professionals. I was dealing with food and on the health food level at a very high level, good cooks, excellent ingredients, all those things that you can imagine, which stood me in good stead, as they say, for my next adventure, which was up near Woodstock, New York. And yeah, well, once I discovered that, my friends had decided to become hard drug users, I left. This is 71. And I ended up with that same group from LA. I ended up in a village of Big Indian, New York, which is about, well, depends on how you drive, 20 minutes from Woodstock. And my friends had picked themselves up after that LA debacle and had started a bakery in this yoga community up in Big Indian. And so they were having a little trouble, and they called me and they said, could you come and see why we're having trouble? Can't really tell. But you'll have fun anyway, and it'll help us out. So I agreed. They picked me up, and I was in Manhattan. I had visited my father, and for the first time in 4 years, and then they took me up there, and I said, "Well, can you show me how you do what you do? Where are your recipe cost cards, and how do you calculate?" And they looked at me like I was speaking French. And I said, okay, you don't have recipe cost cards. They said, no. I said, all right, here's what we do. I'll just go on the project with you from the time you start to the time you finish. So let's get all the materials, and you'll weigh them out, and I'll make a note, and I'll have a complete recipe reference work by the end, and then we'll go through to the packaging and to the delivery and the collection of money, and we'll figure it all out. So I did that. It took a week, for the full cycle. And at the end of the week, I called a meeting, and they said, well, how'd it go? And I said, well, there's good news and bad news. What's the good news? The good news is that people love your product. You're selling everything you're making. It's delicious. That's great, for you. And what's the bad news? You're losing $1 per unit, and you cannot make it up in volume. So they said, well, what's the solution? I said, well, you can raise your prices to cover your costs, or you can change your recipe to meet the prices that you think the market will bear. But whatever you do, you have to have packaging. And they said, oh, packaging. Well, we'll take care of the recipes, and we'll work on that. We hear you. The packaging, we have a guy in New York. He's a friend of the yoga community, and he will help you. Go see him. So I know nothing. I'm 19 years old. I know nothing of this, world of commercial graphics and packaging. And all I know is, how to work, how to roll up my sleeves and get the job done. So I go to New York, and I enter the offices of a man named Milton Glaser, and I don't know his name. All I know is that he's a friend of the community, and he's willing to help. And so I go in, and I kind of, lay it all out. He says, well, how can I help? And I said, well, we have this bakery, and need some packaging, need some, he said, oh, yeah, I get it, no problem. I said, we need a logo. Yeah. And so he's very quick study, and he gets it. And he says, this is, give me a list, and I'll take care of this. And I said, well, when can we expect to see the work? And he says, give me a call in 2 weeks. Of course, I took him literally. And 2 weeks to the day, I called him back, and I said, how's that project coming? And he laughed. He said, oh, he says, yeah, okay. Tell you what, I'm going to put you on the phone with my secretary, and she'll give you an appointment. And when you come in for that appointment, you'll have something to look at. I says, great. So the next time I come in, I don't, just go see him. I'm told to wait in the waiting room. And while I'm in the waiting room, I start to look around, and I can see that there's art on every surface. It's just covered with art. And I start looking closely at there because I recognize some of the pieces. So some of the images were very, very, recognizable to me. And as I get closer to the wall, I realize that all of the art is signed Milton Glaser. And that's when I realized I have been talking to essentially God as if he was one of my employees. And I was very chagrined. And when I finally got in to see him, I apologized profusely. I said, I hope to God I didn't insult you or in any way I'm embarrassed to say I had no idea who you were. I'm so sorry. He said, oh, no, don't worry about it. Sit down. He says, where are you from? And I said, I'm from the Bronx. He said, oh, it's great. He says, I'm from the Bronx. Where in the Bronx? And we compare notes. And he says he's from a place called the Coops. And I said, oh, I know the Coops. He said, how do you know the Coops? I said, well, the Coops was, by the way, one of the first cooperative apartment houses. It was not just an apartment building; it was a complete community of apartments, designed and created by left-wing Jews in the first years of the 20th century, 1906, something like this. Anyway, but I knew it because I used to hang out there. There were girls there, and there were left-wing events there when I was growing up. And I'm a red diaper baby. I come from that kind of a world. And I said, but the main thing that I remember, most memorable thing is that, when I'd be going home, it'd be very, very, very late, like 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning. And I had to take the subway home. So I had to walk from the Coops to the subway. And just before the subway entrance was a bagel bakery. And the bagel bakery was not open for business because they were baking bagels. They left the door open and there was nobody in the front. So I would go in, pick a bagel. There's no, there was hot right out of the oven. There's nobody there. And that would be my snack on the way home. And he looks at me and he says, son of a bitch, I stole bagels from the same bakery. And he's born in 1929. So we're talking about a whole nother generation. And so somehow that bonded us in a way that I can't describe. I mean, I'm 19, he's 42, 43, something like this. He kind of adopts me in a way and becomes my mentor. And because of him, I actually had a life. He introduced me to the world, the New York City-based world of restaurants, of graphic design, of publishing. He opened the essentially my adult life was made available to me because Milton Glaser cared for me. That's the short answer. Anyway, he managed to do a very good job, but we decided, this is back up in Woodstock, we decided that our efforts might be better spent opening a restaurant. And we opened a restaurant that became an immediate success. And it was so successful that Richard Baker asked me to bring my team to help open Greens.
Oh, wow. You were with that group. Oh, I forgot about that. I forgot that tie-in. I mean, I was the first host at Greens. So I was somewhat involved before it opened. I knew what was happening. I didn't start working till it opened. First day, bang. But that's incredible. You were there. You were out there. Wow, I remember that. Yeah, he made a big deal out of it. Brought all you all back. He was very impressed with you.
Yeah, I came with our head chef, our head baker, and our pastry chef. And we stayed, they stayed at City Center and essentially were kind of giving the team there the restaurant 101. And I'm not the hands-on kitchen guy. I'm sort of at the time I designed the restaurant and that we built. It's still standing, by the way. And I was in charge, but I wasn't the hands-on guy. So I ended up at Green Gulch, hanging out with Paul Rex. It was hysterical. We're just drinking tea and giggling, and that was the whole thing. But I met Dick Baker at the July 4th, 1976 inauguration of Daibo Satso Zendo, which was at the time the largest traditional Japanese Zen monastery in North America. And at that opening event, which well, the short story is that my construction company had done all of the interior work for the Zendo. Um, got hired, after they built the concrete walls and foundation and all that. We did all the interior work, the electricity, the plumbing, the interior partitions. Uh, because we built the restaurant, so we had a construction company to build the restaurant in 1972, and then by 1975, when they wanted to build Daibosatsu, we were hired by Edo Tai Shimanoroshi to do the construction. And as a result, I had an inside track. And when Life magazine wanted to do a broad stroke portrait of America on July 4th, 1976, they wanted photographers to pitch stories to them. What is America in 1970, July 4th, 1976, 200 years after the forming of the country. And one of the stories that got chosen was chosen at least to be paid. It didn't get printed. Was the inauguration of this traditional Japanese Zen center in Livingston Manor, New York. And a photographer buddy and I essentially took on that project. And we were at the event where, as you probably know, everybody on the planet who had the credentials as a Roshi or a Rinpoche or a Lama, was at that event. It was an extraordinary gathering. Anyway, that's where Dick was. He was there, and so was Philip Kaplau. So was Bernie Glassman. Of course, Trungpa Rinpoche was there, and Suzaki Roshi was there. It was an insane gang, and as a result, we were invited to San Francisco to help get greens off the ground.
I don't know, Tano, a Sicilian with a construction company? Sounds a little fishy there. Sure you didn't have anything going on the side. Anyway, I'd forgotten that that's probably where we met first time. My gosh.
I have forgotten that me as well. Any well, in those days, and you can't be blamed. In those days, I had a ponytail down to my ass, and uh, I really, I think I weighed 125 pounds wet, and very different time.
Yeah, great 2 years there as the host.
I can imagine you as a maitre d'.
Greens was so popular, though, I spent most of my time telling people they couldn't eat there. That wasn't fun.
Oh, brutal, brutal. Yeah.
That's one reason why I quit. Um, the other was 2 years doing that. That's enough. Um, they thought they could stop me, but I wasn't a Zen Center slave anymore. But then it was brought up in a board meeting, and Richard Baker said, "It's okay, let him go. He's made all the contacts he needs."
Yeah.
It's true, I did meet and get to know many, many people in that job. I had managerial status too, or three. There were three managers: the manager, the head cook, Deborah, and the chef, Deborah, and me. And administration at the restaurant was happy to see me go. I was too dominant a figure there, and rather uncontrollable.
Well, I'm just so happy to see that it's still going. It's gone through its changes, but it's still going. Yeah, my hat's off to them. Those were very different years. The war was still on in Vietnam, and I was Well, no, you're talking 70. No, I'm talking 76. The war technically ended in 75, but it was up until that time that I was still essentially living underground under a fake name, and I was really kind of constrained by the fact that I had been a draft resistor. So it was 1976. That's when things started opening up because they had the amnesty that year, and I could finally get a passport, which I went out and did. I got a passport, my first one, and I had to actually take a driver's test because I had been driving with a fake ID, so I never took a driver's test, and I had been driving since '67. So I had to go out and get a real driver's license and take a real test. That was interesting. That was all 76.
Wow, you went underground. My gosh. Um, hmm. I just presented them with somebody they really didn't want to have in the Army.
I can imagine.
And I was told by the last guy I talked to there, some sergeant or something, that my grandmother would be drafted before I was.
I love it. That's a good line.
Okay, you got to put my muzzle on. All right, what else? What else have you done?
Oh man, there's too many things. Let's see. We did the highlights. The highlights are that uh, I mentioned Milton Glaser. In I left the yoga community in '79, and I went to Manhattan for the first time in my life. I never lived in Manhattan, and I I went to Milton and I said, "What the hell am I supposed to do? I'm a high school dropout. My divorce took all my savings. I don't have any credit under my real name because I've been living under a fake name for 7 years." He says, "Oh, what are you worried about?" He says, "There's two kinds of fishermen." And I looked at him, I says, "Wait a minute, in my mind, I know this guy doesn't fish." But so he says, "There's two kinds of fishermen." He says, "One kind of fisherman looks for the spot where nobody else is fishing. And he goes there because he figures any fish there he's going to catch." He says, "The other kind of fisherman goes and looks, where are all the fishermen? And as soon as he sees where there's a crowd of fishermen, he goes there." He says, "Because that means there's a lot of fish." And I'm listening, and he says, "My office building is a good fishing spot. I'm going to give you an office in my building, and you're going to fish. And there's a lot of fish." So that's what I did. I came to New York. I got an office in his building, and he and I started a publishing company for art. We're publishing lithographs and silk screens and posters and like this. And that was just to get started, and it was to help him out because he was having trouble protecting his intellectual property. And it would be a, a beginning of a activity that would be remunerative for me, but not really enough to hold the whole thing together. Life in Manhattan. But one day he knocked on my door and he stuck his head in and he said, "Hey, still fishing?" And I laughed. I said, "Of course, that's why I'm here, right?" He says, "Right." And he opens the door and he says, "Francis Ford Coppola, I want you to meet your new New York concierge." And I'm looking at Francis Ford Coppola and I'm looking at Milton, and Milton quickly says, "Francis wants to start Zoetrope, New York, and you're going to put it together for him. Have at it." And that was the beginning of my we'll say my new professional life. Was Francis was my client, and he wanted to build in New York a zoetrope, which was his studio, and because he was my client and because he was so famous at that point, he had just done Godfather, Apocalypse, and etc. He was like the top of the world. Um, all the doors in New York in that realm opened up to me, and I was able to create a whole new, well, we'll call it a career. It wasn't really a career because I escaped as soon as I could, but it created a whole new means of generating an income, and alleviated a lot of the stress of being in Manhattan. After that, I mean, that you may remember that Francis went bankrupt in 1979 in order to protect his house from being seized by his creditors, because he had hocked his house in order to produce One from the Heart. He wanted to own the negative. He didn't own the negative for Apocalypse Now or for Godfather. Those were studio films. So he wanted to own the negative, and the only way to do that was to put up your own money. And the only way he could get money was to mortgage his house. And when One from the Heart collapsed, it failed miserably. The creditors wanted his house to pay the loan down. And the only way for him to protect it was to go bankrupt. And when I found that out accidentally, I read the New York Times one night, I realized Zoetrope, New York is not going to happen. And but it turned out that he had left such an impression on New York, and as a result, in his wake, I had the benefit of that impression. I got offered all kinds of opportunities, and I set up shop in Manhattan and did a lot of projects, mostly in the realm of hospitality, I mean, housing and hotels and retreat centers and resorts and things like that, for enough years to put my daughter through college, and then decided, well, that's done. What's next? And what was next was a return to the creative world that I had initially wanted to pursue, and that was photography. And I got some cameras, and I put myself to the task of photographing Buddhism in America. And this is the outgrowth. Well, I attended I was still, for all those years, my friends were, either associated with Trungpa Rinpoche or with Edo Shimano Roshi, or, one or the other of the many, Mayuzumi Roshi, who's one of his students, Daido Lori, had a center very near to my restaurant near Woodstock. And so John and I became friends. He's Sicilian and he's a photographer. So yeah, so we hung out quite a bit in the late 70s, early 80s. And so a lot of my friends were very much involved with Buddhism. I got invited to the cremation of Trungpa Rinpoche in 1987 in Barnet, Vermont. And that was a gathering where a lot of people who wouldn't normally be together found themselves in the same space for an extraordinary kind of high energy event that took a week. And one of the results was a group of us kind of said to each other, this means something, doesn't it? This is like an important event. It's marking something. This is a Tibetan master being cremated with full Tibetan ritual and attendance by all of the top Tibetan Rinpoches. This has got to be important. And, I was photographing it, of course, but at the same time, we were thinking, well, what does this mean? Is this the end of chapter 1 of Buddhism in America? Does this mark a change? How can we appreciate this? Now, this circle of people included Rick Fields and Rudy Wurlitzer and Helen Torkoff and Philip Glass And we all kind of said, well, something has to be done. And folks started thinking, well, I'm going to, Rick said, I'm going to do another edition of my book. And Helen said, I'm going to do Zen in America. And Philip and Rudy were talking about an opera based on a Buddhist story. So I said to myself, I'm going to continue photographing Buddhism in America. I'm going to make a portrait of Buddhism in America using my cameras. And we kind of all were based in New York City at the time, and so we started getting together for pizza, and occasionally, nothing regular, and checking in on each other. How's your project coming? How's it going? And I said, I've been out there shooting wherever I can. And I said, I'm not going to live long enough to photograph Buddhism in America. Every time I think I have it covered, there's 10 new Buddhist centers have opened up. And, new Rinpoches are showing up all the time. This is 87, 88. And, I don't know if I can keep this up. So sort of towards the next year or so, the idea that what we're really thinking about is not, a book or a one-time event. It's an ongoing enterprise, and it has to be, a general audience type thing, a magazine. And we began to, sort of strategize what would become Tricycle magazine. And we got it really going in the year 1990, which was a year of great loss for many of us in that circle. Helen's mother was dying. Philip Glass's wife was dying. My father was dying. Rudy Wurlitzer's stepson was killed in a car crash, all in 1990, while we're trying to birth this magazine, Tricycle. And we got the first issue out in 91, in May of 91, in time for the what was then known as the ABA, American Booksellers Association convention at the Coliseum. Well, in those days it was the Coliseum where they held it, and we were off to the races. The first issue sold out in a blink, and we had to raise enough money to go back on press. But that's when that whole thing started, and it was a very different landscape that into which Tricycle was launched than the one we see today. But yeah, it was an adventure as usual. But and again, because it represented a new and a fresh appraisal and perspective on what was going on, an enormous amount of attention descended on everybody involved. It was that kind of thing. Now, interestingly enough, I would say not coincidentally, I mean, in fact, very much connected to it. It was in '87 when I was photographing Thich Nhat Hanh that I had, kind of connected with that whole circle of folks that had been attracted to him. That included, Joan Halifax, Maxine Hong Kingston, Arnie Kotler. There was a whole crew of Americans who saw him for what he really was an inspiration. I mean, this guy was speaking to them about engagement and about not sitting in the meditation hall only, but getting out of the meditation hall and doing some things that are good. So this is going on in the background, and I told Arnie at one point, he was Thich Nhat Hanh's North American organizer, he and his wife Therese. I said, you guys should make a film about him. I've been photographing the Buddhist communities for the last couple of years, and he is amazing. He's got something very special to offer Americans, and it's not only because he's Vietnamese, Anyway, they thanked me, and off I went to New York. They were living in Berkeley or something, and I started making a film about homeless people in New York City. That was '89. Started on that, and so I'm making a film about homeless people, and I'm helping start a tricycle. And I get a phone call from Arnie Collar, and he says, "How's the film going?" So now the only film I'm working on is about homeless people, and I said, "Oh, it's a little rough. The police, and we have the camps on the street, and there's a lot of acrimony and the parks and blah, blah, blah." He said, "No, no, 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 not that film. The film about Thich Nhat Hanh." I said, "No, no, that's your film. I'm not making that film. I mean, I thought you would get on it right away. That's really a perfect thing for you." He says, "We're not filmmakers. You are." And I had to explain to him how complicated it is to make a film. It's not something you just. It's not like you write something down and you typeset it. You have to. It's a whole nother thing. And after I explained it to him, I said, "Yeah." And the only way the film would even begin is if there was a letter from Thai authorizing it and offering exclusivity, et cetera, because you can't raise any money if you don't have the permission of the protagonist. And I figured that would be enough because I could not imagine Thich Nhat Hanh writing a letter to that effect. But I underestimated the the we'll say the strategic intelligence of Arnie Collar. He basically created a letter and managed to get the proper seals, or indicating that it was an approved letter. And he delivered that to me, and I figured, oh boy, now I'm in trouble. I have to make this film. So I started that in 1990 as well. So that was like a turning point year. And Pieces Every Step has been seen everywhere since then. That's the name of the film. And I just put it online. Thich Nhat Hanh died 2 weeks ago a little less than 2 weeks ago, January 22nd. And when he died, I put the film online for free.
As featured on Gook.com's What's New.
Super. Well, and I said it'll be up until the end of the month, and so on the 31st, which was a Monday night, I put it back in the vault, so to speak. But 36,000 people watched it in 1 week.
Double wow.
And this is 30 years after the film was made. So remarkable kind of continuity, from that formative year, 1990, the start of Tricycle, the start of Pieces Every Step. And I lost my father that year, of course. For me, that's always a milestone. You lose a parent, it's not the same after that. So here we are, 2022. So much has gone on in all of our lives, and this has been a particularly difficult 2 years in North America. I don't know how it's going for you out there in Indonesia, but it's been a roller coaster here, especially if you have anything to do with public events, including restaurants, by the way.
Well, it's been really hard on people who work with tourists. Tourism is, they say, 85% of the economy here. There ain't been for almost 2 years now. Speak of the Indonesian tourists have been able to come, but not all the time at all. It was closed even to Indonesian tourists a good deal of the time, like not being able to drive into a state in the United States. But people here are amazingly cool. You wouldn't know they're having a hard time. They don't complain. And actually, things look sort of normal, or they would look normal if you didn't know what it was like when there was a zillion tourists and traffic jams and gridlock and where we live, it's not too crowded even then. But yeah, I'm impressed with Indonesians, and they've been fairly unified in their response to it. And I don't know, they have. They're not that far away from their agricultural roots. You know, they're not going to starve to death, unfortunately, like people in America would if, you know, everything was cut off, distribution and everything.
Oh, that's sweet. I'm happy.
They have a strong culture. They do have diversity. The motto of Indonesia is unity through diversity. Yep. E pluribus unum, United States. But, you know, things can go bad here, and they have gone bad at times in the past, very bad. But not now.
Mm. It, it 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 sounds nice. It sounds nice. I'm happy for you. Well, we're all hopeful that it will start to turn around, but we're concerned about many of our friends whose enterprises, nonprofit or otherwise, are seriously vulnerable right now, and God knows how many will survive. The only ones that are going to make any money are the landlords.
So I think we're getting close to wearing ourselves out here. And I should probably let you go off to more impressive pursuits. And I will remember to, you know, get hold of Deborah, the Bali International Film Festival people, and, you know, put in a good word for you. But like you said, I think another big film festival person is probably that you could just go directly yourself without my help. But I'll do it anyway because, yeah, it would be cool.
Do that. I took a look at the website while we were talking, and I'm impressed. They certainly have, a sense of mission, and they seem to have an able and quite photogenic team. And film festivals is not rocket science. What's important is the content kind of comes along, every year. What's important is to understand how to finance it all. That's where the real skill set is called upon. And not to take away from the films that they select or their approach to programming, but the truth is that's the easy part. The hard part is surviving. But God bless them, and it looks great. And yeah, I'd love to be in touch. And maybe there are films that she knows of that I should be aware of as well. So it's a two-way street always with.
So hey, thanks a lot. This has been great. I really enjoyed talking with you, and I look forward to the next time we meet. And it might be more possible with you than with some other people I know.
All right, David, you stay healthy, stay sane, and keep making music.
Well, I don't know if I can do the same thing. I can do the music, and I'll keep trucking away on Cuke Archives. And you keep trucking away on them films, them Buddhist films.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So, hey, thanks, Tano. Great. Thanks, Gaetano Kazuo Maida. Huh. Got to follow his film festivals. Got to see all 400 films. And, he's including videos and music videos and cartoons and everything. They gather everything they can. Pretty cool. Well, I can tell you there's a zillion Buddhist type cartoons I saw in Japan. And I'd say things like, they were just, people, they would be just like some fundamentalist religion thing that is just so literal and just so not Buddhist, right? Like Buddha, be good little girls and boys, and you can join Buddha in heaven. And, we're all little soul seeds, and I don't know, stuff like, go, what? But I loved watching cartoons when I lived in Japan because that was a good way to study the language. And let me tell you, a lot of them were very, very unusual and creative. Okay. This has been a Cuke Audio podcast. I'm DC Puba of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, coming to you from Sleepy Sanur, with Doggy Bandita, Feline Cuchita, and dear lovely Katrinka. And we're wishing you and yours and all of us a grand awakening.